Welcome to Agile Actually. Today we're going to be talking to Ralph about our product managers obsolete. We've been hearing some whispers on the interwebs that it's a product manager vs product owner. Which should you have? And we want to discuss what's going on there. Is it really a thing? So we've invited Ralph along. Ralph is a product manager extraordinaire. He's been working in the industry for many years. Would you like to introduce yourself, Ralph?
Yes, I'm Ralph. I'm a turned software engineer. So my background is computer science. I started as a programmer in '97. I got around applying first basically as a programmer, then I added Agile to that. And through that, I discovered Scrum, and through that, I discovered product ownership, next to basically also being in charge for various products. In that regard, I've been helping to create the product owner curriculum at Scrum.org for the PSPO training there together with Don McReal. And the both of us, we also put our heads together and wrote a book about what it means to be a Scrum product owner. And in that regard, kind of like, we also talked about differences and similarities about product owner versus product manager.
Awesome. So you've immediately opened up the big chasm. What's the difference between a product manager and a product owner? Are they the same thing? Are they different?
Now, this is something very interesting because there's several layers you could slice away here. And like an onion, there are different schools in Scrum, what a product owner is and what a product owner isn't. If you look into the Scrum guide, the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the team, the Scrum team, of the work the Scrum team is doing. Now, often product ownership is seen as the widget factory. It's like the team down there, and we just throw them stuff and they crank it out and they deliver the components and widgets. Now then there's this other thought of school where we really think like product owner. So who is the person being accountable for the final outcome of the product? And that's essentially my thought of thinking here, is that as a product owner, you are in charge, you own, as your name tells you, the product. And that means you will be essentially be a product manager, but you approach it from a different angle. You approach it more from an agile mindset in the way you collaborate with your developers specifically, but also maybe how you engage your stakeholders, how you try to close your feedback loops more frequently, because as we all learn and know that the world is changing faster and faster around us. So kind of being on a specific path for too long will probably lead you into that end. And so in this regard, this is kind of, for me, basically the one sentence answer is a product owner is a product manager with an agile mindset. Now, this also opens another can of worms because there are so many product owners out there who don't know about product management skills. They're just, I don't know, being, hey, you joined the Scrum team, you know the product owner, and they have no clue about what it means. That they're like
That's no worries. We've got loads of Scrum Masters out there that don't know how to be a Scrum Master either, right? So what you're saying is that you can have the title and still suck.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the short truth.
I'm a bit argumentative today.
Although in fairness, that applies to any job for anybody anywhere in the world, right? You can have the job title, you can be given the responsibility or accountability to fulfill some job, and you can still suck at it because either you don't know what you're doing or you understand it to be different than it actually needs to be, right?
Yeah.
So to be more kind, we can say there's levels of competence, right? So depending where you are in your personal journey, how much you know, how much you've been exposed to, obviously when you start out, is going to be very different to where you're at 20, 30 years later on.
Exactly, yeah. And for me, the way I think about it, and this kind of, often product owners, they receive a specification document, and they're just basically, you implement that, you're in charge of that. And then sometimes they see themselves as the story writers in Jira and the tooling and so on. And that's essentially, again, this is the wrong approach. You're a scribe for someone else, or a proxy product owner, or what we often use as a term. Now, a real product manager manages a product. You take care about the requirements, you take care about the stakeholder management, you take care about closing the feedback loops with important people, with the market, to learn as quickly as possible to see whether you're going in the right direction. And I think this is a big problem, because there's a majority of the industry which understands product owner as the widget factory. And there's a small subset who really understands we have to bring somebody in there who carries the vision, who has the understanding where he or she wants to take the product, but a clear final end goal, but the path might be open, and then really collaborates with the people, the workforce behind that. And the workforce could be large, and it's not, sometimes people say, well, a product owner can only work with 8 developers. No, you might have a bunch of teams behind you for which you're still in charge, and then you have to find also the right people to help you, so you will become more strategic engaged, and you would leave the tactical and operational stuff more to the teams themselves, the Scrum teams.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in larger organizations that have been successful at moving towards faster delivery of work, is that they have somebody who is that one product owner. Doesn't matter what their job title is, right? Doesn't matter what their job title is. They have somebody who's that one product owner, and that one product owner finds, for want of a better expression, lieutenants that are able to take different parts of the product and fulfill their vision within it. So depending on how you look at it, you could say that lieutenant is a product owner, right, at that level inside of the product. But really, they're not the product owner. The product owner has delegated some part of their ownership to this individual, so that they can serve that larger audience.
Exactly.
So I just want to wind it back a bit, because you've both wandered down the scaling pattern, and I think that's a separate topic. I just want to close out this first point. What I'm hearing you say is that a product manager, an effective product manager, has the understanding and accountability for the whole life cycle of the product, from inception to withdrawal from the market, and they will be looking for maximizing the value of the product. So how do they run experiments to learn, grow, sustain, nurture, and then ultimately withdraw products from the market? And this is this product management discipline that started off in the 50s. What I've also heard you say is there's almost 2 schools of thought about product ownership. And there's a very common one, which I think we're all united in disagreeing with, that the product owner just does requirements engineering. They look after the backlogs, and they're a minion that plays with the dev teams, whereas the product manager does the really big thinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we're all united. We don't agree with that. We think a product owner is an agile product manager, is focused on maximizing the value. And if I could be really blunt, a product owner is a product manager with a dedicated group of people to actually ship stuff. So instead of drawing pictures in the cloud, they've got some people to make that product happen. And using one of Ken Schwaber's favorite words, they can reify faster, because they can close that feedback loop by building something, getting it done, getting it to market.
Exactly.
Are we aligned on that? Is that where we're in agreement?
Absolutely.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree, Simon. And I think there's a kind of additional piece that I think for such a long time, people have believed that product owner is a job title. And you see product owner jobs being advertised on the internet, right? On LinkedIn. And when we're talking about the product owner, we're usually talking about the accountability that's described in the Scrum Guide, which is not a job title. It's a set of accountabilities that have limited scope, looking at the minimum that accountability needs in order to fulfill that empirical system that Scrum's trying to create. And there are lots of things outside of that accountability that individual will need in order to be hugely successful, right? They're going to need other skills outside of that core accountability, because the Scrum Guide's really just focused on this is Scrum, this is product, this is what we're trying to create, and this is a way of starting to work towards that idea. So in organizations, you'll see the job title of product owner. But that job title of product owner does not usually, in my experience, just include the accountability of the product owner described in the Scrum Guide, right? It also includes the additional stuff that product owners need to do, that product managers need to do, or some of those additional things. So it'll have more accountabilities than the Scrum Guide might describe. So there's a difference between the product owner as described in the Scrum Guide and a company's job title of product owner, which actually might be a product manager with much wider scope than product owner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's two things that you've highlighted there. The first one is that the Scrum Guide is deliberately incomplete.
Yep.
So you can do stuff on top of the Scrum Guide and still work. The second one, I think it's a really important distinction, is the Scrum Guide 2020 changes. The term role was replaced with accountability for that specific reason.
Yep.
So it's activities you perform with a Scrum team, but something you can do with a Scrum team, your job title might be different. What's your thoughts, Ralph?
I think I agree with what Martin said, and I think this is actually the way I like to see things if the organization really thinks along those lines. But then for me, it's like what you mentioned is that the role was essentially replaced with accountability, because once you join a company and you work on something, you're accountable for certain outcomes, and that's what you have to put your skin in for that. But I think also the accountability has to be coupled with the right authority. Because what I often see is that in organizations, you're suddenly accountable for a whole bunch of things, but you only have the authority for a subset. And that's set up for failure. And then people start, all kind of weird of behavior suddenly emerges and happens. So I think if you go back to what Martin said, suddenly you own this product in regard of Scrum, but also in a bigger picture as we consider it in our organizational structures and setup, how we have to operate. You have to demand also the right authority as a product owner to act on that and be active.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Have you seen challenges with people achieving empowerment?
What I often do is it's a really simple exercise. It's like a 2x2, like strategic thinking, tactical thinking, business orientation, technical orientation. That's basically, and then ask people, where do you see yourself as a product owner, and which quadrant should you be? And most often it's kind of like in most of the cases, you should be strategic and business oriented. You might do on a technical internal platform product, a big one, then you're more technology oriented, but normally it's strategic business orientation. And then basically also ask other people around that product owner, maybe the people in charge of that product owner, where do you see your product owner to be active? And if they are in different quadrants, you're set up for conflict already, because whatever you do, you will displease your superiors, or your superiors will always be displeased with what you're doing, because even though you think you're doing a really well job. So I think sometimes it's just even before you really engage on that journey or as an organization to bringing in a thinking with product owners to see what's the alignment. And if this is aligned, good conversations will take place. If not, frustration will emerge.
I like that. So you create that effectively a Boston quadrant.
Yeah. For me, it's sometimes like just, this is my garden, this is your garden, and this is defense. This is where we have to talk, but this is where I can operate and do whatever I think is the right thing to do.
So Ralph's the reason, Simon, that exercise exists in my PSPO mural. I stole it from Ralph with his permission, but I stole it from Ralph.
No worries.
And I think it's really. I find that exercise that Ralph is talking about is really enlightening for product owners, or people that have been given some kind of role within the space of product ownership, because they start to understand the difference between their authority within the organization and the accountability that they've been given. And at least if we can at least identify why that frustration is happening, because many people don't realize that a frustration is happening because of these mismatches. If we can at least identify it for them, then that can be really helpful. And I do find, not so much for public trainings, but in private trainings when I use that exercise, because usually there's a bunch of people who are product owners, or going to be product owners, or who are being coached to be product owners in an organization in that group. And then whoever's in charge of that group will come as well. Right? Usually you have that leader in that space, and then they see not only where they would put themselves and their difference between authority and accountability, but they see how their people perceive their authority and accountability, right? Because it's all about perceptions as well. Where do you perceive you need to be versus where you perceive you are, even if the reality is slightly different. And that's the beauty of Ralph's exercise, is that the entire product management organization starts to get a better understanding of where that sits and the difference in communication, and they wonder why people are frustrated, right? Because they've not got authority that matches their accountability that they're trying to.
And for me, the problem, underlying
there's
problem,
a core Agile principle here.
And for me, it's often like,
core Agile principle.
Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I think you've tapped into this core Agile principle of make the implicit explicit. And this is, I think it's recurring throughout organizations, regardless of the process, whether we're doing predictive management, whether we're doing Agile, is being exceptionally clear on your constraints and your operational boundaries.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
What I love about that exercise, Ralph, is it highlights.
Yeah, and for me, it's often like I like to call them those different mental models. It's a little bit of an overused term these days, but it's really about like what is it going on in my head, and for me, it's clear. I have a really clear perspective. I know exactly where I fit in, but somebody else has a different point of view, and they have a different perspective. And they're not aligned, and this is, I think, where also going back to, we just talked about it, Agile principles like individuals' interactions or collaboration over contract negotiation, but kind of bringing people together, just talking about these things and really understanding that we get more cohesion about our mental models essentially, and by doing this we will harmonize the way we work and how value essentially can flow in the long run.
Yeah, and what I like to do after I've had that initial shaping, which I see that exercise, I like using delegation poker from Management 3. What I've observed is most organizations aren't really good at articulating constraints and decision boundaries at a granular level. And that then creates conflicts because that clarity is not there. Like, I don't know when I need to go and speak to my manager or leader.
Yeah.
Now, in high trust, it's easier in small organizations because the trust is higher, and also the ease of communication is higher in small organizations. As soon as we get into Zaibatsu scale stuff, as soon as we get above 50 people, I would argue, or Dunbar's number of 80 people, all of a sudden it becomes much harder to know what's in my decision remit. Where does my decision authority extend to? And that's where somebody's going to get upset that I'm nicking stuff from their turf. So bringing people together and having that clear articulation, this is my decision, that's your decision, and in the middle, here's where we're going to get together and make a joint decision. I think that's really key. And I think that particular behavior should transcend accountabilities or what have you. So we'll see the same thing happening at an engineering level, at a production level, as well as leadership level. If we can cascade the constraints and build the trust, the whole organization will be more agile because you've got better flow of discussion.
Yeah, and for me, this is also this part of product ownership, because if you're a small startup, a small company, you mentioned Barton's number, everybody knows everybody. You just talk to each other and you make it work. There's no silos of functional specific areas. You just basically all pull in the same direction. But now, since the organization starts to grow, you often get functional silos, or you have other structural kind of ways to. And they always work great for one situation, but not for the other one. And if you do it the other way, kind of it's the opposite somehow. And this is really, I think, where the areas where it doesn't really perfectly fit, that we have to really talk about that and find a common understanding about how we really anticipate it and want it to be. And by doing this, I think this is really a good way to shape the definitions of what is our products, because as an organization, you often have more products and therefore more product owners, and how do they align each other and how do they correspond, and how do we make even sure then, let's say you are a big multinational company, but how can you make sure, for example, that your architecture grows cohesively, your testing approach, your quality standards are cohesively? And this is then another challenge on top of that as product ownership, kind of, because then maybe you have this agreement within your product with the organization, but then you have it also lateral, kind of with all the other product organizations within your company as well. How can we communicate there? So I think this is it's a really important function to fill in an organization, being a good product owner. And then I'm really sometimes sad when people ask me, is it okay I'm a product owner for 10 products? And then it's like, okay, I don't think you have really understood what product ownership, or your organization hasn't understood what product ownership is all about, because they are then part ownership for tiny widgets, little bits and pieces here and there.
Well, I think that there's two things that I think that are also important to mention. The first is that product ownership within the bounds of an organization that is building products for themselves or building products that they are going to sell, right? That's kind of like the optimal state of product ownership. That's where we can just look at the Scrum Guide, and the Scrum Guide talks about that type of product ownership, right? But the reality is that many people don't work in that position. They perhaps work in professional services, where they're not building products for themselves, they're building products for somebody else, another company, another corporate entity. And their product owners don't work for the same company that they work for, right? So in the professional services world, I have an engineering team. I perhaps have somebody who is I'm going to have my team of people who are doing the work. I'm perhaps going to have some kind of account manager, right? Somebody to manage that commercial relationship with the customer. And then I'm going to expect the customer to provide a product owner.
I'm going to jump on that. Unless, and this is something that's very near to Ralph and I, near and dear. It comes down to your procurement pattern, right? Because
sure, yeah.
Your traditional procurement model is land and gouge. I'll simplify, and it might be contentious, but I've seen it so many times where very large companies haven't got the capacity, so they They put out a bid. It's the lowest possible. Their then procurement teams are targeted on price, not by value, which is precious to us as Agilists, as product owners. We're focusing on value. However, procurement, who are, some organizations are coming to the party, most aren't. Procurement and legal are still very early adopters. The contracts are then compared based on price, and there will be some small point buried in the 300 pages of this very predictive contract about change requests. And so the initial price looks good, but the change request price is punitive.
Yep.
And so until we have the ability to build collaborative partnerships from the front, trying to use an adaptive, iterative approach in building our products. So, hey, we've got a product owner, you give me a team, we're basically on time and materials, and we're trying to get a win-win here. If your contract is not written with that intent, and your contract is you must have all your requirements signed off before you release the first payment, no organization can afford to be a few million in the hole before they get their first paycheck. And you see this conflict that we need the requirements signed off, and it's like, but we're not doing requirements, we're doing Agile. Yeah, but the contract is written. Until the requirements milestone is achieved, we can't unlock any money, and we need the money. And so you then get locked into it, and it just sets up things in a very dangerous and disruptive way. So that's the first.
Oh, my favorite one, Simon, was working with an organization reasonably recently where the developers, the professional services organization, was on the hook for a certain number of story points per sprint.
Oh, great.
And story points had to be within a certain standard deviation of normal in order for them to not get financial penalties.
And I'm sure that they got really the numbers they were looking for and everything, but did it really happen behavior-wise? You measure, you get what you measure.
You need story points.
Yeah. Oh, let's overestimate. Let's do all of these things here, and this is another thing. This is I think also for me the way I would expect a good product owner to be aware of that. How can an agile procurement process look different? I mean, I was doing a big thing at Swiss Postal Service a couple of years back, and we didn't put out the requirements. We put out, we look of organizations who can work in a specific way, and we described Agile. We didn't call it Agile, and then companies were applying, and so we could choose a company we trusted to work with. And then we went back to a times and material contract. But we also had the definition of done in the contract. So every time we revised the definition of done, we had to also kind of go through the contracting again, but it worked pretty well. So essentially, by the end of every sprint, they were paid for every item which was done. And everything which wasn't done, they didn't see money. So I was encouraging them to get stuff to done. It's better to have little things done than many things in progress and we don't get paid at all. Financing, if you ask so people, hey, by September, you have to tell me exactly what you will be doing next year. And then you have to show them the plan, everything, and then you get the budget for that. And then basically you're stuck in this triangle again, scope, schedule, budget. And then as a good project manager, you basically deliver on time, on scope, on budget. Whether you deliver the right thing, that's another question. That's going back to, and I think this is another topic why I think kind of this term, I like this term product owner, because often we see product management and project management as running along. So there's somebody thinking about the product and gives it then to a project manager. And so I'm not sure if the wording is right, but the discovery and delivery are separated. And I think if you do product ownership well, you bring discovery and delivery together. And I think, Martin, it was you before, I just say, Simon, we don't do really requirement engineering that much anymore. What we do is iterative incremental product development. Every sprint, we deliver a working piece of product. We can look at full transparency. And this is also for me, product ownership is like, I am here, I'm a good seasoned product manager, but I want to work differently. So I need to have the authority to do different procurement. I need to have the authority to different budgeting processes and these things. And this is where, honestly, again, sadly, I believe most organizations fail because they just say, we have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. We can't change that.
But there's something I'd like to pick up on there. How many times have you seen an organization use agile vocabulary for their old processes? It's beyond count. And I always think of The Princess Bride. Do you know the movie The Princess Bride? There's a scene where the evil villain that's just captured the princess, he keeps getting caught, and he keeps using the word inconceivable. And at one point, Andre the Giant turns around and goes, I don't think that word means what you think it does. And I've seen it so many times where people go, oh, we're sprinting. And I'm like, oh, yeah, talk me through it. And they go, it's really easy. What we do is we do a requirement sprint, and then we do a design sprint, and then we do a build sprint, and then we do a test sprint, and then we do a packaging sprint, and then we do a stabilization sprint. My friend, I think you and I are using the word sprint very differently.
Yeah.
And for us to be product owners, for us to be agile, first of all, we need to break through the Oscar Wilde problem, which is nowadays everybody knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. So we need to break out of this cost mindset into a value mindset.
Yeah.
We need to break out of the utilization trap. You know, the mythical man month, you know, if we have 9 women, we can have a baby in a month, right? Get out of that thinking. We need to focus on value, and to focus on value, we need a quality focus. Let's understand what done, what finished, what releasable looks like. And then we can iterate quickly, run experiments, learn, build feedback loops. So
and building on top of that, Simon, I think most organizations, their main focus is resource efficiency. Now, you as an employee, you have to work 100% all day, because otherwise you wouldn't be your resource, your skill wouldn't be leveraged enough. But that's also interesting if you look into queuing theory and aspects like that. You know, once you start to use a street or highway more than 60%, you get the first traffic jams. So you wouldn't, you know, we have this highway, let's use it, and then nobody gets to destination because you have a really long parking lot. So it's more thinking about flow efficiency, and flow efficiency is what you just said, Simon, is really about how can we bring value to the customer as quickly as possible. And this is where the sprints come into the picture, because every sprint is a product increment, which we can then potentially deliver to them, or at least we can show it to them and collect the feedback if we're going in the right direction or not.
what's your thoughts, Martin? You've been quiet, which is unusual.
Well, I've actually been taking notes because there's lots of interesting things we've been talking about, and I think Simon, you were talking about the agile vocabulary, right? And I feel like there are a lot of people in organizations. Agile's been around a long time now. I mean, if you want to go back to extreme programming, it's been around since the 80s. Right, so that's you can probably go back further than that, but if you want to talk about folletism, right? But these words and terminology that came out of the Agile Manifesto 26 years ago are in common usage now, but people don't understand what they mean, what their intent was. They just know how to use them. And this has trickled down away from people that maybe should know better, right? Like the people we mostly deal with, which are in software engineering companies or in product building companies, to procurement and sales. And procurement and sales are trying to use the terminology, not really understanding the implications of what it is they're saying. And you end up with contracts like the one that I mentioned, right? Yeah. Because these sound like great words and terms that we can bring in, and I kind of understand the concepts. Wouldn't it be great if we had this in the contract and that would help us out? And in actual fact, it cuts the knees out of the engineering teams. We're working at odds. And I think the important thing that Ralph was hitting on was that this thing, you know, like I feel like I've got a picture in my head of product owner equals agile product manager, right? Or
Exactly.
some kind of relationship between but agile product management also includes agile procurement, agile contracts, agile financing, agile budgeting. All of those things have to come along as well. Otherwise, you're going to be constrained with the same old Tayloristic hierarchical practices, and you're not actually going to be able to get the authority to do the things you need. Budgeting is a great example of that, right? How many product owners do you know that actually have control of their budget?
Let's put it this way: the ones I knew who had control over their budget were the best, most successful ones.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about was working with the Azure DevOps team at Microsoft, and Brian Harry, who was the product unit manager, was the head honcho for the whole of developer division, and he was that product owner that had the vision, had the direction, and had the budget directly from the CEO. Here's the money you have to go build this product, and he made sure that he owned the full stack. And in actual fact, before they moved to Agile around 2012, when they were doing waterfall, they had to keep the separate legal teams happy, and the separate marketing teams happy, and the separate sales teams happy. Those were all separate departments within the organization. But one of the things that he realized very early on and leveraged his own budget to be able to do it was, no, I can't rely on the legal department to provide me on demand and with understanding of our context the services that we need. We're going to have to hire our own legal people. No, we can't rely on a separate department for delivering anything. We have to hire our own people. And they end up with security and sales and marketing and all of those skills within the bounds of their full budgetary control, because then we can align people's goals and outcomes, right? Because a marketing department has a different goal and outcome. And perhaps the most important thing this year is Windows, because Windows is doing a release this year. And what do we care about this Visual Studio thing going on over here? Actually, you've got to delay the launch of your product for 12 months because we're working on something else and we don't have time for you right now. Right? That's, and I think that goes back to that bigger, wider view of product ownership that is agile product management. That is, you've got to be the top of that full authority. What do I usually say? Fully fiscally accountable. Right? That's the phrase that I quite often use.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, I'm not sure if it was the same guy, but maybe it was even you at a conference, Martin, when I was listening to you, is that in one department in Microsoft, the salespeople, they were not rewarded with how many sales they were doing anymore. They were rewarded after 6 months after they sold the product, how many features of the product are actually being used. So essentially, they didn't just sell and kick it off and run to the next guy. They sold it to someone, and then they had to take care of that customer and really show them all the nice features and everything which is in there. And I think this is brilliant because you think in a product to solve problems for your users, for your customer, and you take care of them. It's not just like. And apparently, the way I remember is that many salespeople, they left the company because they didn't want to do that. They weren't able to do that, actually. So they brought in new salespeople.
There's a couple of things that come out of that. First of all, customer success isn't a department. It's the reason your organization exists.
Yeah.
And a lot of people miss that trick. And they go, oh, well, I just do my thing. And also, if we're leaning into this concept that product management's strategic and product ownership's tactical, your product owners are then this feature factory manager and they're just pumping widgets out. Who's paying attention? Who's going to put the feature on there about instrumentation? Who wants the dashboard of live updates of, your product's like a garden. There's bits that you want to move around. There's some bits that you want to rip out. There's some bits you want to add in. Who's going to pay for the instrumentation of your product to give you objective real-time data? And we see the very aware organizations have this data available, and it guides them. And this is, you can tell Martin and I quite fond of Microsoft, is Satya Nadella, inspirational CEO, 3 days into his new job, just turned around and went, I'm getting rid of Windows Mobile. You know, it broke my heart because it was my favorite mobile platform. It was different. It wasn't a copy. Like Android's just a copy of iPhone. They're both locked in ecosystems. Windows Mobile was open. It worked differently. Anyway, I'll cry about that later. The point was they never got beyond 3% market share after a lot of investment. And there were some really poor product choices. I don't know why they did it, but to adopt the next version of the Windows Phone operating system, you had to buy another handset, which is very expensive. It wasn't, you couldn't just update it. It's like, where's your holistic long-term thinking? Where's your care for your customer? And that's where your ultimate product owner, your CEO, turns around and goes, you've had your chance, you've blown it, that's gone. And that is the sign of profound product ownership. This is the fiscally accountable product owner that Martin's talking about. You're wasting my money. The ROI is not there. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. I'm not squeezing anymore.
So on that, I've got a question for Ralph. Ralph, I've got a question for you to try and wrap up that. How does a strong product owner really shape product success in a way that an average product manager can't?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. So I think that, and maybe it became a little bit clear that actually the way we describe the product owner is the circle, the span is a little bit wider than a classical project manager. Classical product manager. This was kind of maybe a Freudian slip here. So, because often as a product manager, you really take care of product research and what you think should be in there, and then you write it up and you pass it over. And product ownership is basically, from the cradle to the grave. And I think it's like really coming up with an idea. And I think as a good product owner, you are more in love with the problem than with the product. Because while you look into the problem you're going to solve for your customers, how you want to improve their lives, you might come up with a totally different answer eventually, and which might be hard. And I think good product ownership is loving but uncompromising. If the facts are clear, and you have to follow them. And then basically, working different procurement, doing different finances if you're empowered to do that, and then really engage with the developers, the Scrum teams who are doing the work for you. So I think this is, where you as a really, if you have the chance to lift product ownership as we understand it, you will have much more level than a classical product manager.
So I'm hearing connection to done, focus on value, metrics, outcomes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it also a ruthlessness where you'll hold your teams accountable for delivering, as well as constantly monitoring the marketplace to ensure you're achieving maximal outcome and impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this goes back to if the numbers tell you something different, and I think for me, most important is cost of delay to look at as to making feature decisions and things like that. And if the numbers are, and even you really love that one feature, but if the numbers telling you no, this is, well, then you have to do the other thing. And I think this was the example about Microsoft Mobile. The numbers weren't there. Sorry.
I think the problem for a lot of folks is it's much easier, less effort to just ship lots of shit. It's not easy to ship the right thing. It's not easy to pull in all of this data and, as a product owner, make that call. I mean, Satya's call was a big numbers call, right? I mean, what was the write down, Simon? Was it 12 billion, 8 billion, something like that?
Big.
Yeah. I mean,
the stock took a hit.
That's a big decision to make. But
even if you don't think about those big numbers here, it's like, probably do the same thing. But if I'm teaching a product owner class, I ask who of you is a product owner, many hands go up. I just say, leave your hand up for now. Now, leave your hand still up if you can tell me which features of your product are not being used. Pretty much most of sometimes there are 1 and 2 hands to stay up there, and this is a good class. But so most people, they ship shit essentially, and they don't even know that they shipped something really not useful. Because they just go through their feature list. They crank them out one after the other. Yes, we are really good. We are really efficient at what we do, but they ship the wrong product over and over again. And this is where I think kind of like having a really dedicated product cockpit where you as a product owner, you can pretty much on a daily basis see like what's going on. And then basically decide decisions on that.
My favorite example of that, Ralph, is totally inconsequential, right? It's a total inconsequential example, but I think it goes to the scale of detail that a product owner and product ownership might really require. When I was working a lot more with the Azure DevOps team, they released a tool in their product which was about you could kind of create wireframes and drawing and kind of plugged into PowerPoint, and you could create some cool stuff. And we said to the team, do you have an example of actual usage of this tool? Can you show us something that we can take to our customers and say, look, this is the type of thing that they're doing? And at the time, they were trying to add chat to TFS. It was a total failure of a product, right? That was part of the product. Because it just wasn't what people wanted, and it was overtaken by events and various things, but they were adding this. And the feature that they sent us, this PowerPoint presentation, which had all of the data, all of the analysis, everything for this product, this feature they hadn't built yet, right, was to add emoticons to the chat. That's how inconsequential it is, right? It's a total inconsequential feature. There was a whole page that talked about the telemetry that they were going to collect for these emoticons. And what they wanted to understand at the level of I'm typing emoticons into the box was, first off, if you click the little emoticon button, how long does the panel take to pop up? If you're typing the emoticon in, how long does it take to convert from the text into the actual emoticon, right? Because you want to convert it in the chat and back again. And also, which emoticons were clicked and how often were they clicked, to answer the question of, do we have the right emoticons in our space limited panel? Because you don't want a panel to pop up.
Yeah.
You just want a small of options. That's the level of telemetry that every product team should be looking at for every feature they add in their product. And it's the reason, I don't know if you're familiar with App Insights. Application Insights is Microsoft's kind of telemetry tool. It's just a tool for collecting telemetry. You can do all sorts of clever stuff with it. But Visual Studio as a product sends 7.5 terabytes of telemetry every day to the product team. 7.5 terabytes of just telemetry, just usage data of features and performance and all of those things.
So then your product owner is going to task a team to be able to interpret something and create a dashboard from that huge volume of information that goes into your product cockpit. So we're saying that the differentiator between a run-of-the-mill product owner and an awesome product owner, we've talked about finance, having fiscal empowerment and control. We've talked about an outcome focus where they will minimize the amount of delivery for maximal impact. We've also talked about being data-driven. So making sure that product owner is connected to telemetry and understanding of the product, feature usage, also tying that back to the bottom line and the performance of their product towards the company's strategic goals, technically as well as business-wise. So it becomes a super important accountability to help your whole organization deliver customer success.
I want to tap on data-driven. I'm going to use that expression that we all hate. I'm going to double-click on that, Simon. Do we mean data-driven or do we mean data-informed? So there are times as well, although Ralph alluded to making a decision to kill a feature you really like because the data is telling you to kill it. But you also need to bring your experience as a product owner and a product manager to the story and say, well, maybe the data says that not because there's something wrong with the feature, but because there's something wrong with something else. Great.
Okay, so I completely accept data informed because we have biases like survivability bias, we've got confirmation bias. All of these things will be kicking in because we're human. So data informed is a much better explanation. Otherwise, we may as well hand over to Chat GPT, right? The discussion we're having before we jump on the podcast, right?
Tell me what to do.
You don't need product owners. You just fire it into an AI and Robert's your mother's brother. So tapping into our humanity, making sure that we have objective and accurate data to inform us. Also, because we're human, we can be able to detect the difference between a leading and a lagging indicator and have that discussion. But ultimately, leaning into it, making a decision and being accountable for that decision.
Yeah, I've seen a multi-billion-dollar feature in a product, which is crazy that a product could have a multi-billion-dollar feature, right? But a multi-billion-dollar feature in a product almost be killed because the telemetry was telling them that nobody was using it, when in fact the telemetry was telling them that nobody knew it was there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. It takes extra insight, but that only comes from experience, right? Newbie product owner is going to make incorrect decisions, and they have to then look at the telemetry that comes out after that, right? You're looking at your value telemetry. Are we actually creating happy customers that are loving our product, that are delighted with our product, and bring those lagging measures back into their own personal feedback loop of where their decisions I could have made better, and if I could have made them better, what knowledge or what data, what information would I have needed to make that decision better next time around, and then start collecting that data, understanding that thing.
So we're looking for empirical product owners. We're looking product owners that are connected to value. We've said that to scale product ownership, you need to be able to delegate and share authority and constraints and make sure that cascades down. So if you're looking after multiple teams, you will cascade your accountability, but ultimately it's your neck in the noose. You're still accountable for that if you have many teams, and scaling is a whole other topic. But product ownership can scale in the same way that your organization will scale. Just to wrap it up, we've probably hopefully got some listeners out there, and they might be thinking, what's my next step to get better? So we do need product managers. We do need product owners. Product owner is an agile product manager. How do we help, or what would you do? What's your top tip? I want to improve in this space. What should I do?
I think you should always know first of all, have your baseline that you can see am I moving in the right direction? So really establish are you more like a Scribe type proxy product owner type along those lines? And then think about what could be my next step. A good step is always usually Do I understand the domain I'm a product owner for? Do I know the people who will be using with that product? So essentially, what are all the activities you could put in place to learn about that? Maybe start reading books about that topic, start to talk people who are working in that area, and broaden your understanding about all of these things. And while you do that, try to bring that understanding also then into your product. And this is again, I think it sounds very simple and logical. On the other hand, then you have this conflict because your organization maybe expect you to be this type of a scribed product owner. So there's a little bit maybe to politics, another place you have to do right in order to get there. But I think at the bottom line is do good things and show that they work. And once you are capable of doing that, you get more leeway. You can move a little bit further to the right, become a business representative who knows about this, maybe get some more fiduciary rights to work with some larger amounts of money. Maybe eventually you can really become this, hey, I have a good product vision. I have good ideas about specific things we could be doing and start to own those.
Well, so growing up in that empowerment space, what's your thoughts, Martin?
I think there's a combination of things that you need to enjoy what you're doing. And the reason I say you need to enjoy what you're doing is because people generally care about things they enjoy and they care less about things they don't. The difficulty is, like Ralph was talking about, if you're in a position where you have lesser authority than you actually need to do the job, it's causing a lot of friction and you're not enjoying it because of, like, I would be enjoying it if it was in a certain way. So learning is probably the most important thing. Like Ralph said, read books, read blog posts. One of my favorite blog posts I ever read started with the phrase, if you're reading this, you're already in the top 10%. Because most people don't read. Most people don't look at blog posts. They don't talk about the trends. They don't keep up to date with what's going on. They don't take that cool training course on that cool topic that you thought would be interesting and you just want to see what it's all about. People don't do that normally. So if you are wanting to be an amazing product owner, then do those things, right? Be interested in the topic, discover things that might be useful, and then try them, right? And then bring those stories to the community of, I've tried this, it didn't work this way. How else might I try this thing? Share knowledge. That's how you become the best. Is we're not in it alone. There's lots of other product managers out there, lots of other project managers who are all willing to share because they're in that top 10%. Read, learn, try. Listen to podcasts, maybe. Maybe subscribe to our podcast so that you can
subscribe. Learning more. Yeah. So invest in yourself. Be curious. Go and learn more. Go to meetups. Hang out. I'm going to suggest something you don't do, and that's don't get sucked into the noise on social media.
Sure.
There's a lot of try and make sure that when you're reading and getting stuff, just do a sense check with the people around you to make sure that you're learning from reputable sources.
Yeah. There's a lot of crap on the interwebs.
Yeah, so just remember it's the internet, and don't confuse volume with quality, which is probably not a bad shout for product ownership in general, right?
I think it's absolutely.
Less of the right in good quality. Absolutely, is more worth than lots of unused features.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we should wrap it up there.